I think being able to dream allows you to have an entrepreneur spirit because you're like constantly dreaming about things and how do you bring it to life? What can I do? How do I get there? Trying to change your trajectory of maybe who you want to be. Everybody's not an entrepreneur. Everybody doesn't want to take on that risk or that burden or that pressure or the failure. I think I'm just a direct impact guy. Like, how can I have the most impact? And when I worked at the Cecil, I worked really hard. And I say, I worked really hard for somebody else. What about if I took all this energy and did it for myself? What could happen?
Hello, and welcome to the Randall Osché Podcast, where honest conversations take the lead. Each week, we sit down with entrepreneurs, artists, thinkers, and change makers to unpack how they got from there to here and what they learned along the way. Real stories, no filters, lessons earned through experience, so you can take what's useful and leave the rest. Whether you're tuning in during your commute, a workout, or while making dinner, we're glad you're here. So take a seat, relax, grab a cup of tea, and join in the conversation. Now, let's get into this week's episode.
Today, we'd like to welcome Chef JJ Johnson to the show. Chef JJ is a James Beard Award-winning chef, TV personality, author, and cultural tastemaker, known for redefining Afro, Latino, and global Black cuisines through a contemporary lens. Most recently, he was named to the Time 2026 Closers List, a prestigious honor recognizing 18 extraordinary Black leaders working to close the racial equity gap and create a more just future. JJ, welcome to the podcast.
Randall, thanks for having me.
If you're not familiar, I have a personal interest in understanding how people got from where they were to where they're at today. And I think everyone can learn from somebody else's journey, regardless of their socioeconomic status, where they come from, where they're at now, right? I think everybody has a story to tell and everybody else can learn from that. So today I'd like to dive in a little bit to how you got from where you were at to where you're at today and maybe how you got started. Also, interviews tend to bounce around the place. It doesn't have to be in chronological order, but we'll see how it goes. You did a TED Talk several years ago, I think. Pretty cool. But in that TED Talk, you had mentioned your grandmother injected food into your DNA from those moments forward. So if you just want to talk a little bit about that moment in time in your life, and I would assume, what happens when you assume, that might have set you on the trajectory for you to be where you're at today. So just unpack that a little bit for us if you could.
Yeah, I definitely was in the kitchen with my grandmother on a milk crate consistently as a little kid, very eager to see what she was doing. My grandparents, I think like when you're talking about where are people from, I think sometimes you have to kind of look back on the complete path of like where you're from. My dad's African-American, family's from American South. My mom is half Puerto Rican, half Bayesian. And my grandfather, which is my mom's father, was in World War II. And he got a GI Bill, which allowed him to get a home in Long Island during that time. And I don't know if folks really know about that, but that's how a lot of people during that era were able to get homes. So the government was giving people homes. Not many Black people got a GI Bill. About 100 Black folks, I think they say, got a GI Bill. Let's say he was one of them. And that is part of the trajectory of like where I'm at. They sold their house in Long Island when I was about 5 years old. Everybody moved to the Poconos. That one home became 3 homes, quote unquote, right? My parents' house, my aunt, my uncle, and then my grandparents' house. And then my parents, when they would go to work, they would drop me off, or my mother would drop me off to her parents' house. They would go to work. I was young. And then in that house, what they did was they would cook all day. They would listen to music all day. And that's how I was introduced to food, where my grandmother and my 2 great aunts made cooking look really fun and brought everybody around the table. And that's what I saw. So I really wanted to be a part of that, being a little kid, not being watching television. That's what I was doing.
When you were in the kitchen with them, were they doing that as a way of babysitting you or taking the opportunity to also train you on how to be in love with ingredients or how to cook?
No, that was just their day. That's what they did. They were making their own chicken stocks. They were making their own spice blends. They were breaking down chickens. They were looking through recipe books. Like, that was just what they were doing. I don't think I know for a fact that my family never wanted me to be a chef, especially my mother never wanted me to be a chef. I would come from a working class family. Why would you want to go back to being in working class? We worked extremely hard for you not to be in working class, right? We want you to be that next level or basically 2 levels up better than where we were. So why would you take this path of being an hourly employee, know this, know that? These are things that I would hear as I became into my teenage years, because I said at 8 years old, age of my kids right now, that I wanted to be a chef. I never really turned back on it. I always did it. My dad was a big champion of it, to live your dream. Don't live like you coulda, shoulda, woulda. So there's moments where, yes, my dad was pushing for me to follow my dreams because he never really was able to follow his dream. I mean, I think most people don't get to follow their dreams, right? Because they get pushed off this path. No, they did not. This is not what they were doing to groom me. It's not like a basketball kid where you're outside with your son or daughter shooting 4,500 jump shots a day, trying to make sure that they're good.
If you're comfortable with sharing, like, what was your dad's dream, and what maybe precluded him from pursuing that?
My dad's really into baseball. He took the MLB umpire examination and he got accepted to go to Florida to become an umpire, which he would have been one of probably the first Black umpires ever. But he met my mom, and my mom had a real career. She went to school to be an educator. She had her master's degree. So to convince her to move to Florida when she has her own career, he thought that wasn't the right idea to do. So he bigged up her career and then just had hourly jobs to help support the family through his years of working, which he had okay jobs, working at an oil company, working in the Board of Education in New York City. But it wasn't like my mother or my aunt who had career. My aunt had career in nursing. My mother had a career in educating. It wasn't like that. So he didn't get to take that path to become a baseball umpire, which would have been, I think, phenomenal, but our lives would be completely different. I don't know what Yellow Brick Road we would be on, I would call it. So he didn't want me to kind of go through that motion of that this is what you really want to do. You should keep pushing in this area, get a job in this area, entry-level job, dishwasher. Okay, where can you work the closest to? And then kind of build on that. And that's how I kind of wind up in culinary school.
Interesting sort of that story. We're releasing a new episode this Wednesday, and I was reviewing some of the material that we're putting out. And the guy that I had interviewed said something to the effect of, take more risks, and the older you get, the harder it is because there's more variables. Life gets more complicated and as you get older. And not that your dad made a misstep or anything, but like for the greater good and for a relationship, like he made the decisions that he made. And it appears that, at least from the outside in, that was beneficial for you and your family, right? So
yeah, no, definitely sacrificed that and to ensure, and especially like who would male figure in the 70s, 80s were bigging up their wives, right?
It's huge. Good for him.
So yeah, it has worked itself out in its regard of having a good family kind of foundation and pushing me and my sister to potentially look at dreaming differently. And it's okay to dream. You're allowed to dream. And you're also allowed to fail while you dream.
I like that. I think kudos to anybody that promotes like dreaming and then executing on it. So I love to hear that. I think it's almost like American society that precludes people the opportunity to fail because things can be so tight for so many people, right? If you're, say, paycheck to paycheck, but you don't like your job, you can't just go and quit and find a new job. You have to kind of do that on the margins or spend time looking for a job outside of your current job hours, and the opportunity to fail doesn't really exist. So I like that was reinforced for you. If you don't mind sharing, what was that messaging sort of like for your sister when you guys were growing up, or what was that like for her?
My sister was a phenomenal athlete, and she wanted to play in Division I, Division II Puerto Rico professional basketball for a little bit. As you're an athlete, you think you will go one place and then you won't go someplace, or somebody recruits you and then your bubble gets burst, or your parents do some kind of crazy stuff to you as in, no, you're not going to go visit this school because this can't be real, right? My sister was getting recruited by Stanford in the 8th grade. She still has that letter framed. And I think my parents were very vulnerable as she got older to say, hey, we messed up by not going on this unofficial visit to Stanford. because we just didn't know. We didn't know.
Yeah.
Why are we going to California? And so hearing your parents kind of tell you they messed up, but we're going to keep championing you to get to your goals, and you might have missed out on this moment, but don't worry, we will keep supporting you, I think allowed my sister to fully be an athlete till she couldn't be an athlete anymore because her physical body started to give up on her, and supporting her completely through the way, because that's just like a different type of mental than somebody like me that's trying to fulfill my dream and go to college and then trying to figure out where to work in the industry and do all these things. So they were able to balance out her success and kind of push her, which I kind of watched me as an older brother, 4.5 years older, kind of look at that as I got older and saying, oh, that's really cool. Maybe one day when I have kids, I'll be able to champion them the same way, but also have these kind of really hard conversations with you. When people think when you're young, you shouldn't have these hard conversations with your kids. I think kids at a young age, you can be straight up with them because they absorb so much.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't have kids of my own, but growing up, I think that I had the capacity to be spoken to an adult. Just tell me how this game is played and I'll play the game, right? If you're precluding me of information that I'm unaware of, how am I supposed to operate with that? So
yeah, and I think the difference between me and my sister, like I didn't listen to my dad when we came to sports. I think most sons don't really listen to the dads that are very involved. They think somebody from the outside can tell them better. And I watched my dad take a different approach with my sister. And he used to tell her, like, if you don't work out with me, who are you going to work out with? Who's going to push you? Similar to what I tell my kids today, especially my son, if I don't challenge you, who you think is going to challenge you? Who you think out here is going to get you better?
Yeah, who has a more vested interest in your success?
Correct. And when I can't get you there, trust me, I will pass you on to somebody else. If you can get there, then I will pass you on to somebody else who I believe can take you to the next place, right? And I think that's like pertains to business the same way. Why mentorship is really important. And if you have a really good mentor, they will say to you like, hold on, let me introduce you to this next person who I know, who I believe, or I met that can help you out. Because there's none of these people in these big seats get anywhere on their own. They have a network or people are passing them around and grooming them and helping them and opening up a lot of doors for them to do what they can do.
Yeah, this is actually, I was going to save this question till later on, but this is a great segue. One of the things I've learned from podcasting, and this happened early on, is that people need people. And it's not something that I was thinking about before, but after like interview 4, 5, or 6, and like you would be my 37th published interview.
Congratulations.
Thank you. That everybody's story relied on somebody else to get there in a different form or fashion. But like people that have interviewed for specific reasons, I think they're cool, interesting. I think they've reached a level of success, and I want to reverse engineer that. And one of the things that was true for these first 5, 6 interviews is that everybody got to where they were because of support from other people. As it pertains to you and mentorship, you had mentioned previously that you had a mentor, Alexander Smalls, and I was wondering if you mind sharing a little bit about how that relationship started and then maybe the benefits of that specific mentorship with him.
Yeah, I mean, Alexander was great. I was on a show called Rocco's Dinner Party. I got this random email from a gentleman named Alexander Smalls. I searched the internet left and right, and the only Alexander Smalls I can find was a Grammy Award-winning Broadway star opera extraordinaire. And I was like, this can't be the guy. Maybe this is a fake email. But I said, I'm a risk taker. I'm going to reach out back to him, which I reach back out to everybody because you just don't know who you're going to meet on your career path. And in my view, nobody's bigger or smaller than me. We just all in it together. And he wound up saying, oh, great. Thanks for reaching out to me. Do you want to meet me for breakfast in a couple of days? And it was literally 5 blocks from my house. And I was like, oh, this is getting really weird. And just happens that he lived 5 blocks south of the meeting and I lived 5 blocks north of the meeting. And we met and it was a great conversation. And I think he's just a gentleman with big arms that takes on folks at different times in his life when he feels that they need help to navigate. And he took me on as a mentee without telling me. He just took me on. I wound up going to Ghana and cooking for dinner series he hosted at a hotel for about 2 months. And that changed a lot of my career. And just being around him and listening to his stories and how he takes care of people and what he's done has really kind of showed me the way. And then he wound up giving me my first shot at running a restaurant. And then as I worked there, he mentored me. And then as I kind of moved on to do my own thing, he relinquished me back into the world and then took somebody else on, right? And that's just what he does. I think that having him in that time in my career was very beneficial. I was very doubtful of myself, right? Because I was cooking very Eurocentric food. I was never able to use flavor. I was never really able to express myself. And he allowed me to really say, hey, cook it. Let's taste it. Let's see what it tastes like. And let's tweak. And that's what we were able to really do there. And he built a big amount of confidence in me and to showcase my talent when many other people just couldn't see. And that's why I believe I am where I am today. He was that pivotal point, what I kind of call in my life the yellow brick road, where you'll come in your career at a point and it will split and you have to make a decision. Do I go to the right or do I go to the left? I have these two great opportunities. And at that time when I met him, I had a great opportunity to work with the Tao Group to be an executive sous chef, which I always wanted to be. That would have led to a CDC role. But I was like, oh, this just feels like everything else. Let me go try to take this. I was working at Morgan Stanley. I had some job security. So what could be the worst thing that could happen? I felt like I could always go back and get that job with Tao if this didn't work out with Alexander. And I didn't really know what was going to come of it. He just was saying he was working on these things. For me, the intriguing part that he was allowing me to express myself through food, which I wasn't doing in any other place I ever worked.
I find it a bit amusing that you said that you were cooking Eurocentric food and you weren't able to use flavor.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like you'll see like Eurocentric food pull in another part of the world into the food that makes total sense why it kind of goes together, right? But they don't ever talk about it. They never say it, right? They're like, oh, this is French, but it could be French African, right? It could be French Senegalese. And they're pulling these flavors, same thing in France, but just called a different name. But they never say that. Or Nobu, right? He just really started saying that his Japanese food had Peruvian flavors in it. That was the magic. But today, in today's world, people want to know that. How does that differentiate himself from every other sushi spot? So it's just interesting. For me, that's just what it is. I think it's a little tough because you're like, should I dummy it down? Should I do this? Should I do that? But yeah, the flavor's always been my magic.
You were classically French trained. You went to culinary school. You refer to it as a food factory in the best of terms, I think. But it's very uniform. It's very rigid. Everybody has the same approach, does the same thing. And I think you acknowledge that that was the base, the foundation of cooking. And then anybody that has that foundation can then experiment from there and then introduce some of their own heritage, their own flavors. Correct me if any of that is a bit off.
Yes, that's correct.
My question would be how did you then jump into the deep end from the Eurocentric food and cooking and the classically French trained to I'm going to try to elevate this food or this cuisine with these flavors from West Africa, the Caribbean, and South America?
It was the guys I was working for. They wanted to do a concept that was around Afro-Asian American food. The only other way I would have done that if I went out and raised some money and then said, hey, I'm going to do this restaurant on my own, right? Or I would have went on Top Chef or Chopped or did something and somebody would be like, oh, what's that? Let's talk. There's not a pinpoint to be like, hey, this person did this. I worked for this person and now I want to do it, right? That's typically how it happens. And I have a different point of view. This was like, I didn't know I had this in me. I've always wanted to push it, but I didn't know I was allowed to do it. And now I have the allowance to do it under somebody that also wants to do it. And then it allowed for me to keep expressing myself and then veer off and do my own kind of things. And I kind of tell people all the time, if you look at the Cecil's 12 years ago, which is kind of crazy. And now you can see all these Afro-Caribbean restaurants around the world. You also can see people cooking from their diaspora, Korean food, even French food. This is my grandma's kitchen. People are leaning into it. That's all because of the Cecil, right? Because nobody thought they could ever do that. And the two guys that own the Cecil, the late Richard Parsons, Alexander Small, powerhouses in their respected field outside of food. People with other caliber were like, hold on, maybe I should invest in folks like this. Maybe I should give somebody a chance. So, I'm just the beginning of the story and it keeps going. Now I'm kind of on my own doing it with FieldTrip in the rice bowl space, fast casual, and then more to come developing out a full service concept that will be reflective of who I am.
So let's touch on FieldTrip. What is FieldTrip?
FieldTrip is a fast casual rice bowl shop that embraces community and people around the simple slogan that rice is culture at an affordable price point for all.
A couple things I want to pull on there. One, when you think of FieldTrip and what you created, why is community one of the first things that was on the agenda to accomplish or makes you talk about it today? And then why do you say rice is culture?
Restaurants are based on the communities they're in. I think when you look at certain restaurants, they start to grow, they kind of lose that community essence. But regardless, you're talking to a certain community of folks. I believe that regardless where my restaurants are, we need to put effort into that community, hiring people from that community, giving back in a food insecurity space into that community, reaching out to children to big them up and give them a sense of comfort, and that they can look at folks and see and ask questions and be eager. I think that's just important. If you don't do that as a restaurant or even as a business, I have to question you just straight up. And then from a rice's culture standpoint, the whole 94% of the world is growing up on a rice culture. And it doesn't matter if it's plain white rice that your mom cooked or that Korean steamed rice from your best friend's house or the peas and rice or roast gandules. It doesn't matter. Everybody has a rice culture. And that's what we're embracing at FieldTrip, that you should come in here because we're speaking to potentially your rice culture, maybe in our interpretation, but that's why there's a place for you.
Going back to your grandmother's kitchen, standing on that milk crate, were you able to envision something like this? Do you, looking back now, and be like, this is exactly what I wanted to do when I was 8?
No, I just wanted to cook food. I didn't really know what it was. I always had an entrepreneur spirit. And I tried to get my parents in high school, refinance their house to open up a Cold Springs franchise. I was always trying to get them to do things in an entrepreneur way. I never knew that I would be at this point because I never worked in a fast food restaurant. I'm still learning about fast casuals as we speak, as being the most consistent food product you have to put out. So it was all new to me. Did I think of that then? No. I think when you have an entrepreneur spirit or creative spirit, you are torn. Your soul is torn. You're like, oh, I want to do this. I want to do that. I want to do this. I want to do that. I think once you find your groove, then you can accelerate in many different areas. I look at myself now as a food company versus a restaurant or a restaurant group. We're a food company that touches on many different verticals or will touch on many different food verticals and have experts run those spaces with my creative ideas implemented in it to be successful. I always question folks that are like, I'm a serial entrepreneur. What does that really mean? That to me, that just is, I don't really believe in that. Because if you're a business owner, you're trying to build a portfolio and it could be you're an entrepreneur already. So what makes you a serial entrepreneur?
Yeah. What do you think led to or caused that creator spirit or that entrepreneurial spirit that you had ever since you were young?
I think being able to dream allows you to have an entrepreneur spirit because you're constantly dreaming about things and how do you bring it to life? What can I do? How do I get there? Trying to change your trajectory of maybe who you want to be. I mean, listen, everybody's not an entrepreneur. Everybody doesn't want to take on that risk or that burden or that pressure or the failure. I think I'm just a direct impact guy. How can I have the most impact? And when I worked at the Cecil, I worked really hard. And I worked really hard for somebody else. What about if I took all this energy and did it for myself? What could happen?
Yeah. So you had mentioned that you look at yourself as a food company now, right? When I was doing my research for this, I think almost that Chef J.J. Johnson is a bit of a brand and you put your stamp on things. I'm intrigued with the trajectory of, say, the podcast. I've tried to go through doing it myself, realizing there's a lot of work into it. And then I hired a couple virtual assistants. I had gone from 2 to 1, and now there's a team for this will be released in season 3. I have a team of 4 other people, so 5 including myself, not all full-time, but part-time hours, 1 full-time person. So I'm always curious that I think a lot of people, including myself, thinks that you can do things on your own. And getting back to what we mentioned before is people need people. And to me, just with starting the podcast, it was a bandwidth problem and an expertise problem. I didn't want to edit, so I knew I was going to hire an editor. I didn't know if that was going to be a freelance person or full-time. But then as I started to get more into it and I started to understand how it works, I was like, I'm going to need more people. So at what point in time in your career did you realize, one, to start to look at yourself as a food company or Chef J.J. Johnson, the brand, and be like, I'm one person. I can't do this. I can't accomplish the dream alone. I need to start thinking of this at scale and then start to make hires?
Yeah, and at first I would say I was doing it all by myself, using like sous chefs and things to fill gaps of admin areas and stuff of that nature. Then when I went out on my own to do FieldTrip, trying to open a FieldTrip, trying to do brand stuff became extremely hard. And at that time, I kind of like split the task. I hired Samantha Davis, who has an amazing hot sauce company now called Hot and Saucy, gave her a little bit of equity in a FieldTrip to really be in there and oversee it and be the point person from day one. And then hired a young lady at that time called Sammy Abreu, who I met at a function that I spoke at for Forbes 30 under 30 years ago. And we kept in contact. So she was my first assistant hire. Your assistant kind of does everything and anything. She traveled with me. She made sure I completed all the tasks. But basically, like what you just said, Randall, the reason why I hired those people was I say the things you don't want to do anymore, right? And can you afford to pay the people? Because I felt like my talents needed to go in different areas. And I needed people to do these task-oriented things all the time, right? And a lot of things is you look at the business, like you work in the business or you work on the business. I kind of work a split of like I work on the business and I work in the business. Right now, I decide what I'm working on in the business. FieldTrip right now, I'm working on new menu items. I'm working on sourcing ingredients, those things in the business. I also work on the things I don't want to do that I'm moving away from which is EP, AR, HR, all these things. That's where my spirit shouldn't be. Of course, I'll always be a part of AR and always part of AP because you have to watch the cash, but just looking at things that you can't do and then can you hire the experts? So those were kind of my first kind of hires on the brand side of FieldTrip and stuff. Samantha kind of moved away and I worked it back in the business. We hired a manager. You try to figure it out. I try to say all the time, when you raise money for a restaurant, most restaurants only raise money for 3 months. So like, oh man, I need money for 3 months. No, you should be raising money like a tech company for like 3 to 4 years of like burn capital because you don't really know where this business is going to go. And I know that's a lot of cash, but they give it to tech companies. So why not give it to restaurants? And though that's how it really started. And then what happened was Sammy left. She went out to work for a really great company that she met while working with me, hired another assistant. But when Sammy left, I did an exit interview. And she's like, yeah, you need like a chief of staff. Like you need somebody that has the title of chief of staff because they have so much ownership in this. I'm like, I'm not paying chief of staff. I don't have chief of staff money to pay. And then I met a young lady named Kara Rashkin who was at Nomad, the famous Nomad bar, who handled like all the reservation platform. She came in as an assistant and then stayed with me for 2 years and kind of moved into this chief of staff role, which was really great. Then we did a deal with Wonder Food. Wonder Food, I opened a restaurant with them. He gave us capital to help me grow my business because now I have another food vertical. And then we hired somebody for social media. So now we had somebody for social media. We had Karen in the chief of staff role. And then FieldTrip had its own director of operations. My sister then came over and started running catering and technology. So the team started to grow on the executive level, which then took a lot of pressure off of me. And then you take these moments where then you then look and say, okay, do I actually need all these people? And can some of these jobs merge? Do they all do the same things? Do the brands talk to each other? And we wind up moving away from like in-house social. And a woman named Andrea Soto came on, who's been with me now for 3 years. She's amazing. We have moved into like freelancers on the social side to try to figure out who kind of understands the brand on both sides. Adriana and Lisa are still in the role, but now we have multiple field trips. We have 2 in New York, 1 in Rock Center, 1 in Rockefeller Center, and we have 1 in the Atlantis. So there's different team members now, different places. People travel to check on things. We're opening 1 in JFK Airport really soon, in Terminal 4. So there's all these things that kind of go on. And then you have to start to think about, okay, you have operating people, and then your business kind of shifts to this expert model. Like you need experts in the space. Like you need expert people doing catering, expert people doing social media, expert people doing this stuff. That's where folks really lose the growth of business. Like you're probably like a $1 to $5 million business and you're trying to figure out how to get to 20 million. You need to start hiring experts because they're the only ones that are going to get you to 20 million. The team in place might not be that team. So I'm always reevaluating the team. Like, where are you an expert at? And then how can I move you to that expert space and potentially replace you with somebody else? I don't want you doing 3 or 4 jobs anymore. I'm looking for somebody that's an expert in 1.5 jobs, 2 jobs now because the business has grown.
Let's take a quick break from today's episode. If you're enjoying the conversation, take a second to like, follow, or subscribe wherever you're tuning in. We'd really appreciate it. You can also find us on Instagram at Randall Osché. That's RANDALLOSCHE. And check out more at podcast.randallosché.com, including show notes and other resources from today's episode. All right, back to the conversation.
I'm listening to all that and I find it fascinating. But one of the things that sticks out to me about that is something else I've learned or has been reinforced by all the interviews is starting before you're ready. I think a lot of people in your situation perhaps could look at the scenario, but I can't do it all on my own, but I also don't know what the perfect roadmap looks like for who to hire and what responsibilities to give them. Is that one person or two people? And they just spend their time in this hamster wheel of a feedback loop of evaluating and planning, but not taking steps, with the theme of like starting before you're ready because you're figuring out on the fly, which I think is the only way. You talk about tech companies, like, they don't know what their company is going to look like in 2-3 years. They just know that they have capital, they have an idea, and they're going to figure it out as they go. I think a lot of people don't recognize that's how things actually get done. So what was your like maybe mindset when you started to think through that? Was it just, I know this is how it works, I need to start before I'm ready, and we're just going to see how it goes?
We were raising money to be a rice shop similar to Momofuku, like a noodle bar. That was the model. That's how the design was. And then we just couldn't raise enough money. And my business partner, Will Sears at the time, said, we should do a fast casual model. Look at all these fast casuals working. Like, why can't we do that? Why can't we put it in paper plates? We're like, yo, man, I don't know the systems of this. And it was like, I think I could help. I could figure this out. So we built the systems, then went back to investors and said, hey, there's no more money unless you guys know we can get another $400,000, $500,000 from somebody, but we don't have any more capital. That's why we did it the way we did it. And then you kind of learn during the way. You have too much staff. You have to let go of people. The signage is in the right spot. People maybe don't know you're open. Your marketing's not there. And then you have to figure it out. And the model kind of changes. You think people are going to line up outside. They do, then they don't. The waiting area is not in the right spot. And you kind of learn. It's the first model, right? What people don't realize is like you compare yourself to a brand. I catch myself comparing myself to Chopped or Dos Toros or Sweet Green, right? Or Naya. These guys have been around 25 years. I'm always like, let's go back and look at them when they were like 2 locations. What did it look like? What did it feel like? What did they say they were doing in revenue? That's now what I try to do, because you get so caught up. I got to be like this and I'm not like this. And I feel like I'm failing. And then people compare you to them too. So that's a lot of the issue. But I don't think you're ever ready, Randall. Like, when are you ever ready?
Never.
You keep going in that hamster wheel. By the time you know, time has went by. Now, quote unquote, you're in a different place. You have job security. Maybe you can't convince your family for you to take this limb. I just never really had that issue. My wife was really supportive. And at that time, she was my fiance. When I left to Cecil, I was like, I'm going to do this. She was pregnant with our kids and kind of never really questioned me. It was like, all right, you going to do this? So the support system, I think, which a lot of people don't realize is really key. Internal 4 walls. Who is really supporting you in the internal 4 walls? Those people might support you. They might call you out. They might call you shit, whatever it is, but at least you know they're rocking with you. And I have to say, my wife was a big component of that, where I never fully kind of doubt myself on what I'm doing. And she never was like, how much are you getting paid? Where's the check? There's been months as an entrepreneur. There's months where you don't get a check. There's months where you don't even take a check because you're making sure everybody else is paid. Now you have to have that mental stability of how can you do that?
As a comparing yourself to others, which comparison is the thief of all joy, especially when people have been doing it for longer. I find it to be a fun exercise to sort through people's podcasts that I maybe admire, and I'll listen to their first episode, and it just gives me a little peace that they didn't have it all figured out then either.
Yeah, like you was like Joe Rogan, nobody knew this dude. Nobody knew this side behind this thing. Like, yeah. He figured it out though. He figured it out. He figured out who base people are. Tyler Perry didn't have it all figured out when he did his first film, but then he started to figure it out and people around him helped him. So I think you have to dream, you got to try, you got to push, and for some reason it will fall into place, or you just keep on going.
Yeah, you got to be action oriented. I think there's a lot of people in life I've come across that want to do things, accomplish things, but they're not willing to like move differently. They're not willing to try new things. They're not willing to take a risk. Maybe that's because they want the perfect roadmap of how to get there, but that we know that doesn't exist. But I think the key is you got to be action oriented. You got to do the thing. And then as you do the thing, you'll get better at doing the thing, right? You don't go to the gym for the first time, put 225 on the bench and be like, I'm going to get this today. That doesn't work that way. You got to put in the reps to get to there. You have to have bad form before you have good form. Getting back to the cooking and cuisine, when it comes to how you create like flavor profiles or create new dishes, how important is it for you to honor the origin flavors that you're working with, or for those to be represented in the food that you're putting on plates?
I try to honor like the unsung grandmothers of the world and celebrating their dishes or flavors, but it's always my interpretation. It's never going to be authentic. What does authentic really mean? Who knows what authentic is? So it's kind of my interpretation. Like people are like, when you make jollof, it's not a sauce, it's a paste. I'm like, yeah, it is a paste. You're right. But for me to make it consistent in my restaurant, we make it into a sauce, right? So the team can then pour it over the rice after it's cooked and fluff it, and you get the similar flavors. So I will go to a place, maybe go to the place first and say, ooh, I want to cook on Barbados, right? I want to explore Barbados. Then I'll think about all the foods of Barbados. And maybe I'm like, oh, they do flying fish, but I can't get flying fish. I look for the most fish closest to flying fish. And I'm like, okay, how do they bread it? Okay, they do this and this. And then I'll start to break it down. Okay, what goes with this fish? And then maybe I'm pulling ingredients from New York and I'm merging it together and then I'm putting that on the table. But I'm always using the place or the people or the peoples to develop a dish of kind of what I'm doing. Like right now at FieldTrip, we're going to probably enter into the wrap space. We're going to use paratha bread. And what kind of wrap are we going to envision? Can paratha bread be like a mission, San Francisco mission, like burrito roll where it's like super dank in the middle, like trying to go to a place? And then does it need to be like super complex, or should it be like flavors New Yorkers are looking for during the spring, summertime? Is it a spicy Caesar, chicken Caesar wrap, like peri chicken? Is it like a take on like a fish fillet, but like our fish fillet with our crispy cod, cornmeal? So like doing things like that and then building on it. And also just kind of looking at trends or trying to make a trend. Like we're going to use collard greens as our wrap for one of our sandwiches, because I believe like collard greens are just versatile and they'll hold well and it'll look great. So we're just things of that nature.
How much of what you do at FieldTrip is driven by a trend versus what you want to do? And I guess this is the context in which I think of it. I think a lot of things are trendy, but won't be around. Like my full-time job is in software, and there's a lot of buzz about AI. I use AI every day. I think it's beneficial. It cuts down some of the work I do, cuts it down in half. But if it wasn't for me, the work's not getting done, right?
Correct.
I think it is going to change the marketplace, but not to the scary effect that people think today. And I still think if you fast forward 5, 10, 15 years, that largely the workforce is going to be the same. Maybe not 15 years, but 5, 10 years, I would argue. And I have reasons for that. Different podcast, different time. But how do you balance following the hot dot, as a former colleague of mine would say, versus maybe staying more grounded or more authentic or even stubborn about, no, I understand that's trendy, but I'm going to do it this way because this is the traditional classic. People are always going to eat this type of thing.
So I'm never doing anything kind of classic. I don't think you'll ever see anything classic from me. Maybe.
Not in the sense of, I don't mean classic as in, I don't know what classic food would be, like McDonald's or anything like that. But I
like, no, like chicken fricassee or like chicken parm, right?
Yeah.
I think I might play in the realm. I might change the flavors out. I might do a spicy rigatoni with peri sauce, right? But I don't know if you'll ever see me do something classic. I'm always pushing the boundaries. I'm always trying to disrupt. I would say from a FieldTrip perspective, consistency is where my mind goes first. Can we consistently put out this product if we do 700, 800 of these a day? And how do we do that? And if in my mind, when I'm breaking it down, we can't do that, I move away from it. Yeah. Right? It might be the best dish. It might be amazing. I do a dinner series called Let 'Em Cook, and I did these jerk mushrooms and everybody loved them. And they're like, oh, you need to put these on the menu. And I've been thinking, okay, how can I put these on the menu where they're going to be crispy, they're going to be glazed well, that everybody's going to get it the way they got it in the dinner? I'm not sure that's possible. Right? I can give you a jerk mushroom, but I don't know if it's going to be like that. And that's like where my mind goes in FieldTrip, because it's really about consistency, and why you see a lot of fast casuals shrinking their menus to ensure that the teams can put out the most consistent product. That's where I go. I say like Chipotle cares about the flavor. They don't care. I think now they do, but before they never cared about how much they put in the bowl. It was like, scoop, go, scoop, scoop, go. But they care like, will you get the flavor? Will it taste right? Every time. Where I think now everybody's like looking at McDonald's as a model, like, oh, let me see if I can get as consistent as McDonald's. And you'll never get as consistent as McDonald's or Chick-fil-A because it's all frozen food that's fried. And that's not the model we're getting to. But I want to try like for you to at least get the same thing in FieldTrip when you walk in as close as possible that you got it to last time when you came through the doors. And there's a lot of dishes I would love to put on the menu, but would never work from a consistency perspective.
So that's like in the decision-making metric, that's the first thing. Can I do it consistently? And then maybe you'll consider like what's hot in the marketplace and maybe some other factors.
Yeah, we also listen to our customers. Like, are they saying we need more vegetarian items? People were saying we want hot sauce. I'm like, well, I know hot sauce. I love when we call Samantha Davis and we got hot and saucy on our tables now. So we're also listening to the customers. And it's not me listening to the customers because I'm not interacting with them like that. But I'm going to my cashiers and my team and saying, what are customers asking you for? What do they wish? What are they like? Oh my God, I wish you had this. Or, JJ, they've been asking for the shrimp bowl again. I was like, okay, let's bring back the shrimp bowl. Let's see. I took it off the menu because I looked at the sales, but maybe there's a core clientele here that I'm not thinking about that's driving them in once a week to get that. And then they're getting something else, right? So I'm listening to my staff that is then listening to the customers. And then we're building off of that.
How did you create the culture or the feedback mechanism where your staff is comfortable having that dialogue with you, right? Some people I've observed in this world, they know it all and they walk around with that bubble around them of, I know everything. Whatever you say to me isn't going to impact how I move because I'm already making the decisions with all the information that I know in the world. Obviously, those people don't, but they're unapproachable. How have you created the culture at FieldTrip where your staff is comfortable interacting with you, bringing you ideas, what the customers want? How have you cultivated that?
I don't know. I want people to treat me the same way I want to be treated. And I remember being in a role similar to them where I just came in, busted my butt, and nobody ever listened to anything I said. So it's like, hey, I'll take your feedback. It's an open door policy. I'll listen to you. That's not going to jeopardize your job. That's just ridiculous. As long as you're respectful, right? But it doesn't also mean that it's going to happen. But I'm going to listen to you and I'm going to bring it up in the corporate team and say, hey, Latricia said this. You guys work with her more than I do. Why haven't you brought this to me? So I also use the staff as a mechanism of really knowing what's going on in the business, understanding the people, and also understanding them. Without them, there is no business. I can have the greatest idea, but if they don't want to come work and do the job and meet the need, then what's the point? I'm always like, I could do better with the staff. I can do more for them. That's always in my mind. But yeah, if you ever follow me in the FieldTrip, the first thing I'm always asking people like, hey, you good? Everybody's all right. Are you all right? Anything I can do for you? I know a lot of people think like, oh, you're just full of shit. But it's like, hey, if something really did happen and it was like an HR situation, I would be like, hey, do you remember on X date I walked in and I was like, hey, could I do anything for you? That was your chance to be like, hey, I have an issue with this employee, JJ, or I need to talk to you about something. Or can we schedule a call? Like it's truly open door. Or, hey, I got this personal issue going on. I just want to talk to you to let you know I'm going through some stuff right now. So my energy might be down. I think that's the other thing I let the team know. A personal issue shouldn't hinder you here at work. And if you want to talk about it, we can, but I'm still looking for you to show up, right?
Yeah.
I'm still looking for you to do your job. If you need time, you need to take care of your family or something comes up, just let us know. We're not going to let you go because everybody goes through something. I think that has been a big factor of why we've been able to retain a lot of staff. I always make these jokes like when FieldTrip becomes really big, I'll have, what's her name from Billions, where you can make an appointment with her and sit in her office and she's your therapist, right? And you can have somebody to talk to because we've lost so many great employees because mentally they're just going through stuff and we just couldn't help them.
Yeah. I think oftentimes we can overcomplicate how to approach situations to make ourselves available when it just like be a decent human being. Right? Just be a decent human being. I think I spent most of my career working in corporate America. They say one thing, but then they don't act like decent human beings. And they say they want like a culture of collaboration. They really don't. But kudos to you for creating that environment for your staff. A couple things I wanted to touch on, and then I have some questions I always like to cover at the end. You've been very vocal about the lack of investment in Black-owned food businesses. I guess where has that shown up? Or where did you recognize that?
I mean, listen, I've raised money. I've done a Series A with FieldTrip, small Series A. I'm very thankful for everybody that's invested in FieldTrip from private equity to friends and family. But going through that process, and when you sit down with people, you tell somebody how much your business is worth, and then they'd be like, are you sure? I'm like, what do you mean? The guy I hired, the fund manager I hired, did the actual numbers of the business. If it was up to me, I would put opportunity costs and all these things in it that everybody else does. But my fund manager said, no, let's go with hard numbers. This is your first time ever raising real money. Not to say that friends and family round wasn't real money, but real money, people hold you feet to the flame. And you get on the phone, people are like, nah, man, there's no way. We're going to we'll value your business at X. Like, how can you value my business at X? And then when you talk to other Black founders, they've gone through the same thing. And then when you go and listen to white founders, you're like, hold on, how much money did you raise? And you have a prototype?
Yeah.
How is that even possible?
I've never raised money, but my former career was in finance. They're pro forma numbers. They're all made up anyways. They're projections. So why is a Black person's projection of made up numbers better or worse than a white person's made up projections, right? Make that make sense to me.
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. And then also if another Black founder fails in the space, claims bankruptcy, then it affects everybody else that's raising money because, oh man, goodness, because we're all carrying each other. So like you failed, now my valuation goes down because people are like, such and such just failed. And they'll bring it up on a call or a meeting. But I'm always fighting in the space. That's why I said I consider myself a food business now. I've seen a big change of like bringing experts in. I've been really fortunate to bring in a gentleman, Gary Haggerty, who used to be over at Marquis, who ran Martha Stewart, Emerald Lagasse, Sir La Table, and he's the managing director overseeing all brand JJ and overseeing consumer packaged goods right now as we launch our vertical. And when he gets on a call, the whole tone changes because he's an expert and he also managed the king, queen of the food, the whole food industry.
Yeah.
So people are always like, why are you with this guy? You went from here to a startup. And I always just laugh in the back and I always get on the phone like, oh man, you made that happen, Jerry. He's like, oh, it was you. I was like, no, but people feel comfortable. And that's what I learned. You got to make sure you have folks with you when you go to raise money, especially us Black founders, folks around you that other people feel comfortable with or as the expert or that can talk about it or they know. Because it does make a difference. You might be paying a little bit more than you have to, or you can, or giving up a couple more points than you should, but it does help out. And then the other quorum I have with it all, and people know this, I've talked about this, is also Black founders being able to tap into Black folks that have money, right? And that's also really hard because we look at rappers or musicians and athletes, right? And we're like, yo, why did you just invest in that business? I had the same business.
Yeah.
When I originally was working, I was close to getting an investment with A$AP Rocky, which was really cool, but they wanted to move really quick. You're talking about move quick. I had none of the financials ready. And I really moved quick. It was like, I could have just gave them a projection. Hey, I'm looking to raise $5 million. 1 point is do y'all want to come in? We'll sign an LOI or a term sheet with you, and then we'll put everything in a data room. I didn't know that. I got to have everything buttoned up. I'm not ready. I missed out on that, right? Yeah. And then sometimes I tell my fund manager all the time, because I'm in the midst of a raise now, it's too buttoned up. Because then you meet people that want to invest and they're like, oh, what about this? Or what about this model? Can you change this? And then you're just back to changing it. Let's just work off of real numbers. Let's get the 1-pager, 2-pager going. Let's show the model and tell people we want to raise and keep building from there. I think a lot of folks want everything so buttoned and then they realize they put in all this work and then they're changing it as they go. So that's a little bit about how I think on it.
Too rigid sometimes.
Too rigid.
Yeah. What's the most influential book you've ever read?
What's Danny Meyer's book, Setting the Table?
Setting the Table. What impact did that have?
Looking at how to treat people well.
I love that. What was one lie that they told you?
What's one lie that they told me?
Yeah.
They are always telling me lies.
Fair. And if you could give your younger self a piece of advice, what would it be?
I think the only thing I would probably tell my younger self is like, you should have probably worked in better restaurants when you were younger. And when you were in a space that you knew the restaurant wasn't good, you should have went in your own community, worked at the best restaurant that you could have worked in. I think could have made me a better cook earlier on.
Yeah. I've covered this before on the podcast too, but go where you're treated best. And if you're not welcome where you're at, move on ASAP, right?
ASAP.
When does the new FieldTrip open at JFK?
It should open at the end of May.
End of May. And where can the listeners go find you at?
Listeners can find me at Chef JJ on all social platforms. Pull up to FieldTrip in Rockefeller Center or in Harlem, New York, or even in the Atlantis in the Bahamas, you might see me. So any of those places or on any social platform at Chef JJ.
Excellent. JJ, thank you for taking the time speaking with me today. I'm incredibly appreciative of the opportunity. So
Thanks for having me, Randall. Really appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
And that wraps up today's conversation on the Randall Osché Podcast. Thanks again to our guest for sharing their time, knowledge, and lessons with us. If the episode brought you any value, the best way to support the show is to follow or subscribe on your favorite platform. That helps us reach more people like you. You can also visit podcast.randallosché.com for blog posts, full transcripts, and other episode resources. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, stay sharp, stay curious, and keep moving forward.